Do you guys remember the Barbie movie? It was more than a year ago, which is honestly like a decade ago in today's digital landscape, so I don't blame you if you forgot. But I remember that the premiere was so fun. Dressing up in pink and seeing it in theater with my friends, telling each other that you are enough, seeing all the Barbenheimer crossovers and general memes. It was truly a cultural phenomenon, but as much hype as it generated, was it truly a feminine phenomenon? The movie had many feminist themes. Gender roles, the patriarchy, beauty standards, and also the general existential crisis that Barbie goes through. However, the way the film delivered these messages were quite on the nose and spelled out for you in the characters' dialogue, sometimes even out of the blue, especially towards the end of the movie. Not to say that this automatically made it a bad movie. The movie is self-aware and purposely camp. I don't think all films have to present their messages in subtle, layered ways in order for them to be fun or good to watch. But let's just say that I personally felt like there was a lot to be desired. Fun movie, but it didn't really make me reflect, and it is pretty much an anti-marketing ad for Mattel. It didn't really change me in any way, And I don't think it succeeded in changing the viewpoints of others who probably could have benefited from the basic messaging of the movie. Fast forward to a week ago. I keep hearing praise for this new movie called The Substance. Now, all I knew about this movie was that it was about beauty standards and it featured body horror. Now, I am not a huge body horror person, but I do love a good movie about beauty standards. I think it is a timeless concept and one that I find personally relatable. And considering all the praise it was getting, it piqued my interest. I was curious about how they were going to combine the themes of beauty standards with elements of body horror in a way that got general audiences raving. And oh my god, did I receive the movie experience of the year. This movie remained squarely on the theme of body dysmorphia. Even though Demi Moore, who plays the main character, is already thin and beautiful, the lighting and angles that the director chose purposely highlighted the signs of her age. There's also a staunch contrast between the mature stylings and nervous mannerisms of Elizabeth versus the juvenile stylings and confident mannerisms of her younger self, Sue. The movie even hits you over the head with multiple reminders that Elizabeth and Sue are the same person, meaning that the contempt they have for one another is merely just contempt they have for themselves, with all of that contempt stemming from a disdain for Elizabeth's body. Yet somehow, despite its simplicity, The Substance was really effective at making me reflect upon how I view my own body. Which brings me back to Barbie. It's fascinating to me. Here we had two movies that were both very camp, attempted to critique the standards placed upon women, and was over the top, on the nose with their messaging. Yet one seemed to affect me much more than the other. Why is that? Well, after rewatching both back to back, I realized that The Substance was really just what the Barbie movie was too cowardly to be. Now, when I say that these two movies are comparable, obviously I don't mean in every single aspect. Barbie kind of attempts to hit multiple patriarchal issues, whereas The Substance predominantly, as I said, focuses on body dysmorphia. But that being said, there are quite an odd number of similarities between the two. I already mentioned the campiness of both, but there are also the saturated colors, the use of the song Thus Spoke Zarathustra when Barbie is revealed, versus when monstro Elisa Sue reveals herself to the audience. The Barbies and Ken screaming at Barbie when they realize that she is no longer perfect, versus the audience screaming at Elisa Sue's face reveal. The male executives' general mannerisms being portrayed as this kind of goofy hive mind, and them being the secret real villains who impose these standards onto our protagonists.
Too bad her boobs aren't in the middle of her face instead of that nose.
And of course, the protagonist's respective depressive episodes that occur as a result of failing those imposed standards. Like I said, odd number of similarities. Or was it an even number? I wasn't counting. Let's look at our main protagonists. Barbie versus Elizabeth Sparkle. Barbie is a bit more like Sue's character. She's young, perky, perfect in the eyes of the executives, and she goes on a journey to find self-acceptance as she begins to have signs of aging. Because in the Barbie movie, it's her internal feelings, which are generated by Gloria, that affect her external appearance. The thought of death somehow creating cellulite on Barbie's thigh. Elizabeth, though, is the opposite. She's Sue's/Barbie's older counterpart, and she reacts to aging in the opposite direction. Instead of going on a journey of self-acceptance, she tries every which way to reverse or hide her aging. In addition, it's more so Elizabeth's/Sue's external experiences that affect their internal feelings and drive their actions. It's the need to look good for career opportunities, as well as Sue's fear of Elizabeth's body, that makes her not want to switch. Though as we all well know, this only exacerbates their resentment for each other, as Elizabeth Elizabeth grows more and more deformed from over-extraction. Both protagonists' change in external features manifest from their fears of aging, though Barbie's fear of aging comes from a more mortality standpoint, whereas Elizabeth is merely afraid of not being conventionally attractive. As a result, the protagonists, despite having similar struggles, have questions and conflicts that are parallels of one another. Barbie is trying to solve her existential crisis and find her purpose, whereas Elizabeth is trying to cope with failing what she thought was her only purpose. And how well do these movies address their respective conflicts? As mentioned, the body dysmorphia really is generated as a result of their surroundings, which are ultimately created by the executives of the respective universes. Barbie is surrounded by other perfect Mattel-made Barbies who all have their own unique talents, serving as a source of insecurity for Margot Barbie. And the Mattel CEO wants Barbie to remain in her quote-unquote box, undoubtedly a metaphor for sticking to the beauty standards and other misogynistic status quo. Similarly, Elizabeth experiences body dysmorphia because she overhears her own producer, Harvey, state that she is too old to continue to be a star, and the media that surrounds her is taken up by her younger counterpart, Sue, her environment telling her that her younger self is wanted, while she is not. Both executives played heavy roles in cultivating the environments that make our protagonists feel insecure, yet both also get limited screen time, showing how they are far removed from the conflicts they create for our protagonists. That being said though, these two executive characters go about reinforcing their standards in different ways. Will Ferrell and his fellow execs chase Margot Robbie around Mattel headquarters as they attempt to trap her in the gender roles box. It's all very comical, and Barbie is clearly just a complete victim here. She is being hunted down against her will. Harvey, though, rather than forcing Elizabeth to change herself in order to fit the beauty standard, or the box if you will, just pushes Elizabeth out of the studio to find a younger talent who will fit in the beauty standards box instead. And with Sue, Harvey merely sets these unspoken standards that she forces herself to meet. The standards in the Substances universe are presented more as a choice that Elizabeth chooses every time. And I feel like this is much more realistic representation of the issues that come with beauty standards and pretty privilege. Rarely is anyone ever going to tell you to your face that you're too ugly or need to get like a billion plastic surgeries in order for you to achieve things. Well, I guess unless you're like a K-pop star, but that's a different story. No one's going to chase you down and force augmentation onto you so that you can fit the beauty standard. They might complain about how ugly you are when you're not in the room though.
Jurassic fitness, really.
Executives and audiences alike, these people will find someone who fits the beauty standard and commend and reward them for it. It makes them seem less shitty to give beautiful people compliments and opportunities versus telling ugly people that they are being denied kindness and fortune because they're not attractive. And to be fair, I think that a lot of people are not even aware of how their own biases play out in their actions. I don't think I have to give examples for this concept. We all see it when it comes to social media and which influencers get to blow up. But looking at the substance, consider when Harvey fires Elizabeth. Even though she already heard the official reason why he's letting her go, he can't find it in himself to tell it to her face, instead getting tongue-tied and then using a fellow executive as an excuse to avoid the conversation. Then, when he hires Sue, Harvey hires her purely because she is a girl who fits the beauty standard to a T, regardless of the fact that he doesn't know what her credentials are or what experience she has. Hell, the girl doesn't even have social media. She could have been a con artist for all he knew. And in a way, she kinda was if you consider Elizabeth's use of the substance to be cheating. Another example of this reverse parallel between the two movies is our protagonist's relationships with women from different generations. Barbie, again meant to represent an ideal young woman, generally has a positive relationship with older women. There's a scene where she's sitting at a bus stop and out of nowhere tells this older lady that she's beautiful.
You're so beautiful. I know it.
When it's time to eat, I be his main platter.
It's kind of random. She also takes comfort in Ruth Handler's presence and advice and believes that she has to ask her permission in order to become human, to which Ruth Handler proudly tells Barbie that she's always been able to do whatever the hell she wanted, because Ruth created her with the autonomy to explore all sorts of possibilities. And while I'm not so sure why Barbie is so quick to idolize these older women and call them beautiful, considering she still holds on to her traditional beauty standards several scenes later,
I'm like you now. Ugly and unwanted.
Thanks.
I do appreciate the idea being portrayed here that older, seemingly wiser women know to lift each other up, and the message that confident older women are the real role models. Because honestly, for me personally, nothing has helped me cure my insecurities more than watching older women in my local dance classes carry themselves with the same grace and athleticism as their younger counterparts. Watching them helped me understand that life is never over, no matter what age or what you look like.
She's an incredible inspiration, still taking point class 2 times a week. I want to be just like Mrs. Poole when I'm her age.
And I feel like this is the reason why Barbie looks up to these women as well. To see them thriving even though they have endured her fear of aging. Well, you know, until Barbie 180s and still makes a stink about being akin to Weird Barbie. Come on, Greta Gerwig, make it make sense. As for the substance though, yeah, Elizabeth has the opposite relationship with Sue. Sue never really respects Elizabeth and vice versa. You can tell because these two never put each other on a damn bed when they switch bodies. They just leave each other on the floor or shove each other into a closet. I found it crazy how Sue just drags Elizabeth's body on the floor after Elizabeth has some fresh stitches. That made my own back hurt in the theater. There's this interview where Sue has a chance to credit Elizabeth as being her inspiration, to acknowledge everything that Elizabeth has given her, but instead she just goes on to talk about how old Elizabeth is and how outdated her show was. It makes the whole audience and even the show host laugh. And it's frankly so disrespectful and humiliating for Elizabeth. Now in this case, I don't know if I'd say one dynamic is more realistic than the other. Believe it or not, there are women out there who have healthy and loving relationships with their grandmothers or other maternal figures within their community. I will say though that the way these relationships are built up make more sense in the substance versus Barbie. Again, Barbie just kind of happens upon these older women randomly. She finds them inspirational even though they're kind of just sitting there or minding their own business. And she somehow feels kinship and absorbs anti-aging body positivity sentiments from them. Except not really, because again, the portrayal of Weird Barbie. Elizabeth and Sue's relationship, on the other hand, I think is an accurate portrayal of the ever-growing generational rifts we see on social media. It stems from the inability to empathize with one another. Sue can't relate to Elizabeth's struggles because she can't fathom the alienation and depression Elizabeth is going through. How could she when her own social life and career are booming? Opportunities and excitement come so naturally to Sue because of her age and beauty. So when Elizabeth fails to do the same, it seems like an individual failing on Elizabeth's part to Sue.
She wastes 7 days stuffing her face in front of the TV.
Never mind the fact that Elizabeth probably had to recover from birthing Sue, was already stripped of her career opportunities when she was beautiful simply due to her age, and should be free to spend her time however she wants in retirement. But as I was saying, I do feel like Elizabeth and Sue's relationship is representative of the growing disconnect we have between the generations. Yes, there are elements of youth culture that will remain unchanged over time. The women before you understand what it's like to grow up in oppressive environments and be attractive yet so insecure and be anxious about what the future holds. But at the same time, with social media now in the mix, youth culture has transformed beyond what older generations' wisdoms can account for. And unfortunately, this has caused some young people to brush aside senior kinship and advice that could be potentially helpful and supportive. Unlike Barbie, who was under the impression that Ruth's age and status also indicated her authority, Sue feels like her youthfulness and popularity established her authority over Elizabeth. It's crazy because Sue and Elizabeth honestly could have benefited greatly from each other's help, yet somehow entered some sort of fierce competition with the only other person who could have possibly understood the other's struggles. But again, this is a result of the industry celebrating and prioritizing youth and aesthetics. And sadly, as a result, we have pitted 2 bad bitches against each other. Or 1 bad bitch? You know what I mean. So far, I think I made it obvious how I prefer the substance and all of the main story beats that it shares with Barbie, and I think ultimately the reason why I like it more is because of its rawer honesty when it comes to the more emotional beats. Barbie obviously has more humor than the substance, making it more entertaining, but the downside is that the humor softens what could have been more compelling emotional beats. Take, for example, when Barbie finally breaks down in Barbie Land because she can't convince the other Barbies to leave their trad wife roles and take back their city from the Kens. She just kind of flops there. It's funny, but I think they missed the opportunity to have Barbie reflect a bit deeper or vocalize how her and the other Barbies contributed to this problem by creating an oppressive society, rather than give all the talking points to Gloria later on. And yes, I know Barbie acknowledges this later, but up until that point, Barbie kind of just expresses how she wants her matriarchal society back. So it makes the moral of the story kind of muddled.
Barbie Land was perfect before. I've never wanted anything to change.
The Ken, Alan, and Outcast Barbie oppressions are also downplayed for laughs. Again, I get it. We're making a funny movie here, but like I also said, the presentation of these things as comedic throwaways, without allowing room for more serious discussion, is like such a LaCroix of social commentary. Like, I get the vague whiff of how the movie is commenting on how we should treat outside groups with more respect, but at the same time, the movie narratively doesn't want to grant those groups respect.
Would you like a job in my cabinet?
May I please have sanitation?
When Barbie finally does have a non-comical emotional beat, it's still not really portrayed in a way that is relatably vulnerable to me. It's kind of hard to feel the weight of Barbie's despair when we're surrounded by this brightly colored world, and Margot Robbie still looks pretty crying. And that's just not the case for a lot of us. A lot of us aren't crying with our perfect hair and our friends standing around ready to support us like we're some kind of helpless baby animal. I'd bet that a lot more of us feel that burning hatred of our own incompetence and then complete defeat as we sit in darkness, like how Elizabeth portrays in these scenes. The substance has far less humor. I think more of the comedic beats are given to the goofiness of the male characters, and as mentioned before, I believe it's because these male characters are unaffected by oppressive beauty standards. Please note that I am only saying these male characters that are treated as comic reliefs. Obviously, men can still experience body dysmorphia, and that is also portrayed in the movie with the nurse who suggests the substance to Elizabeth. However, the emotional beats portrayed in Sue's and Elizabeth's scenes are, in my opinion, so raw and accurate to reality. One scene that really spoke to me because of how well it reflected reality was the scene when Elizabeth attempts to get ready to go on a date with Frank. Everyone always talks about this scene, but I will too, because Demi Moore deserves this scene to be talked about after doing 11 takes. I love this opening shot where you just see all of the shoes and clothes on the floor. Already you could tell that she could not find an outfit she was satisfied with. And then the shot where she's rubbing her makeup all over her face because she's just so angry about how she can't seem to look right, and then ends up not going out at all is so real. I cannot tell you how many times this happened to me when my body dysmorphia was at its peak. I'm much better about it now, but damn, do I not miss the times where I would just have multiple outfits laid out on my bed and be in tears because I thought everything looked awkward on me, and I knew that the people at whatever event I was going to go to were going to look infinitely times better. Just like Elizabeth in this scene, the body dysmorphia tended to win, and I ended up not going to those events. And that always just felt so defeating. And you know that it's such a silly reason to be upset. You know that the people there don't think you look bad or anything. And you have people tell you that you look fine. I mean, Frank complimented Elizabeth's looks, but a lot of times, somehow, it's just not enough. Whether it's because you personally hate the way you look, regardless of what others tell you, or you think that they're lying to you out of pity. And you don't want to have to care about such a superficial thing, yet at the same time, your body dysmorphia tricks you into thinking that the only possible outcome of you attempting to socialize is embarrassment from being in an aesthetically pleasing place of which you do not belong. Needless to say, it's tough. And I had never seen a scene that so accurately portrayed all the frustrating emotions that come with the losing battle that is self-loathing. Now, this scene shook me, but it's not the only one that shook me to my core. There's a scene where Sue is just so frustrated with Elizabeth for overreading and leaving the apartment a complete mess.
Control yourself!
So she extracts 3 months worth of stabilizer fluid from her back because she can't bear to be in Elizabeth's body anymore. And during then, she calls Elizabeth gross, old, fat, and disgusting. And it just completely reminded me of this one beauty influencer I saw who said pretty much the same things about herself.
I don't think I want to run today. And I said, well, I think you look like a pig. Oink, oink, bitch. Do you want to go another summer with your fat fucking stomach and your chubby little fucking thighs that make you look like one of those little fat babies? It's a lazy day. Bitch, every day's a fucking lazy day for you. Every single fucking day you are butt fuck lazy. I don't care what any of y'all say. It's never helpful to be kind to yourself. If I was kind to myself, I'd still be fucking laying in bed like a big fat loser. I literally looked in my mirror. I said, oink, oink, bitch. You want to complain about how much you weigh and then lay here in bed all day like a big fat fucking loser? That was a mile. Can't fucking breathe, feel like shit. Worth it to be skinny. Miserable now, or miserable all summer when I look like a fucking beached whale. All I know is I'm gonna look like a fucking $1 million this summer, because I'm not on my fatty McFatster shit right now.
Like, seriously, I already thought that the way that this influencer talked to herself was just needlessly cruel and jarring, but this scene of Sue angrily saying that shit while kicking Elizabeth over and extracting her youth juice really just serves as the perfect visual of this. Like, Like, do you realize how mean you're being to yourself? Do you know what it will do to you in the long run? What will you do when your hate becomes so toxic you can no longer use it as fuel? There are many different portrayals of depression and anxiety out there in media nowadays, and I'm glad that we are able to talk about these mental illnesses more freely. But I do also think that a good half of that depression portrayal is served with a mask of humor, and another half gives a best case scenario type of portrayal. One where the protagonist has a community that they can fall back on, and in the end, they get better thanks to everyone's support. I appreciate how The Substance gave us neither of those. Elizabeth is alone in her struggle. Many can say that she is the cause of her own conflict. Her addiction consumes her. Her character to me is presented so realistically, yet also so sympathetically. You just know that the director understands this specific struggle and wants to present this journey in a way that accurately depicts the feeling of it, versus a director who is excited by a large multitude of different concepts and presents it as anarchic fruit salad. And it's at this point that I want to go back to how the movies end their protagonists' respective conflicts. You see, in the end, the Barbies end up restoring their matriarchal society and agree to be more mindful of the oppressed groups. Of course though, to better reflect our reality, the Kens are not granted as much power as the Barbies. As the narrator says, they gotta work their way up. Barbie herself, though, ends up rejecting Barbie Land and opts to become human, to embrace the mortality she once feared, and also to be free of the system that encouraged misandrist practices. It's an okay ending in my opinion. I don't know, personally for me it feels a little weird to pair the matriarchal satirical ending with Barbie's more genuine existential conclusion. I think it was Greta Gerwig's way of saying that our issues with gender roles currently have no definitive solution, but what you can do is embrace your own humanity and be ready to face life's many contradictions. I think what I have an issue with though is that I feel like the gender role conflict was put more in the forefront of the movie compared to the vague existential one, so it feels weird to me to give the gender role conflict a less conclusive ending in comparison. I'm not sure if I'm explaining or understanding this well though, so if you have input on the Barbie ending, do let me know. I will say though that the way Barbie receives the inspiration to resolve her conflict is also strange to me. Yeah, let's talk about that Gloria speech. Now, I know this speech had a huge effect on some people, and I don't want to discredit the effect it had on you. If you love this speech, I do not think any less of you for thinking so. I feel like anything that helps us feel better and reflect is a win. However, from a narrative standpoint, I feel like half of the contents of this speech do come from nowhere. If you forgot, essentially Gloria monologues about how women are supposed to somehow be progressive while also conforming to gender roles and standards placed upon them, and how the whole thing is just an impossible process that no one ever really gets thanked for. And like, sure, but also we didn't really get to see Barbie or Gloria experience these things in the movie, so it kind of just feels random for her to bring up. For example, one of the things she says is how a woman is supposed to have money but not ask for money, which, like, did either of you guys have money issues? Was that a problem shown amongst the women in the movie? Because that struggle was not shown anywhere. But I also think it's kind of weird for Gloria to say that she feels terrible if someone as perfect as Barbie can't accomplish all of the standards that she laid out, when Barbie wasn't imposed with half of those standards, because she was living comfy in Barbie land. I'm not sure if you could relate women's real world gender struggles to Barbie when she was already living in a matriarchal parallel to our patriarchal society. Elizabeth/Sue, on the other hand, in her futile attempts to be even more beautiful for the New Year's ball, takes on her most monstrous form, becoming Monstro Elisa Sue. This form is not stable though, because Sue beats the crap out of Elizabeth.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
I love the young people.
And remember, you are all one. So she eventually dies, fading into irrelevancy, the last of her swept up by a pressure washer. Now, despite this tragic ending, I'd say that this was a happy ending for Elizabeth. When she is Monstro Elisa Sue, it is the least frustrated we've ever seen her as she gets ready. She does her best to look pretty and simply accepts when things go wrong. And I'd argue that several scenes later is when we see Elizabeth at her happiest. When she crawls onto her star, finally free from her own body, we finally see her genuinely smile. Whereas Barbie opted to become human to find real happiness, Elizabeth finds real happiness in being this inhuman form. And overall, I think The Substance has a stronger ending compared to Barbie. Barbie didn't really convince me that the route Barbie chose in the end was her best course of action. I understand the logical conclusion of making changes to Barbie Land's matriarchy after experiencing oppression for yourself, but I'm not fully convinced on Barbie embracing humanity. Yes, I understand she saw the joys of womanhood in those visions her Lord and Savior Ruth bestowed upon her, but I feel like most of the major lessons Barbie learned throughout the movie are kind of just given to her, rather than her experiencing and learning from them herself. Again, hence partially my issue with the Gloria speech. I think for me, it would have been more meaningful if we saw Barbie along the way help resolve the conflict between Sasha and Gloria and have a heavier hand in establishing equality in Barbie Land before she makes the decision to become human, so that way she has the confidence and experience to embrace the even harder conflicts that come with humanity. On the other hand, in The Substance, we've seen Elizabeth just struggle so hard to maintain the ideal form that is Sue. Even when Sue is literally draining so much of her life force, even when Elizabeth has the option to end Sue, she just can't do it. I feel like what makes The Substance more compelling is that we watch Elizabeth go through this journey she's inflicted upon herself versus Barbie passively going through a journey inflicted upon her by others. So in that ending, when Elizabeth finally realizes happiness by being free of her body, it's like so much more of an aha moment, in my opinion. Not saying that you have to be on that doomer shit in order to have a more genuine message, but I feel like the ending solidified The Substance as a more effective cautionary tale, whereas Barbie feels like a less effective inspirational story, if that makes any sense. Again, not to say that Barbie was ineffective, but just less effective in my opinion. You know though, even if Barbie didn't speak to me as loudly as The Substance did, I should give Barbie more credit. Yes, it gets a lot of flack for having surface level feminism, and I do agree with that. Nevertheless, I think those of us who are chronically online very much tend to forget how your median voter isn't even aware of basic feminist theory. Do not forget that a majority of people are so checked out that they were searching up if Joe Biden had dropped out of the election like days before election day. It is kind of bleak, not gonna lie. But while looking through various reactions to the Barbie movie, I came across comments like these where people talked about how their family members or older women came out of the theater with a fresher perspective. And I can't discredit that. As much as I love The Substance, I do have to acknowledge that Barbie is probably going to be a more tangible and digestible introduction to feminism for the general audience. I have to give Barbie credit for starting a conversation in spaces that I'm not a part of that wouldn't have happened otherwise. In other words, I have to consider that I am probably not the target audience. So even though I think The Substance ran while Barbie walked, I have to thank Barbie for giving The Substance some fashionable hot pink running shoes. Does that metaphor even make sense? Now, before I conclude the video, there is one last similarity between the two movies that I have not talked about yet, and that is their homage to 2001: A Space Odyssey with the use of the song Thus Spoke Zarathustra. I'm pretty sure I'm not pronouncing Zarathustra right, but I don't speak German, so please bear with me. But this is a very iconic orchestra track that gets overused in movies, honestly, often in corny ways. Ever since children's movies got their hands on this track, it's been awful. That aside, let me talk about how it is applied in the Barbie movie versus The Substance. To give you some background, A Space Odyssey is a sci-fi movie that plays with the concept of God and evolution. The very basic gist of the plot is that aliens help man evolve through the use of these monoliths that give them knowledge and deeper cognition. As man grows and evolves, they discover another monolith that helps them through the next stage of their evolution until the end when man transforms into a star child himself. The song Thus Spoke Zarathustra plays both at the beginning of the movie, when Ape first finds Monolith, and then also at the end, when man transforms into Starchild. And it's really interesting how this song is set up in both the Barbie movie and The Substance. Because in the Barbie movie, the song plays at the very beginning when it introduces Barbie as a new toy meant to serve as inspiration for little girls everywhere. There are clear visual references to A Space Odyssey here, and it's interesting to juxtapose Barbie with the monolith. Just as the monolith helps apes evolve into their next stage of mankind, it's like Greta Gerwig here here is saying that Barbie helped girls expand their ideas of what their potentials could hold. However, just like when this song was used at the beginning of A Space Odyssey, this only marked the beginning to the evolution of womanhood. Women would eventually grow and evolve and be ready for the next monolith, which is where we find ourselves in Barbie's journey in the movie. Barbie discovers in the movie that the younger generation has grown and evolved past her ideals and require a new monolith of sorts. The song is also foreshadowing the transformational journey Barbie will go on, though instead of becoming a star child, Barbie becomes a human at the end of her journey. With its use in the beginning, I feel like the song itself, with its epic drums and swelling horns, celebrate the influence Barbie once had on the older generation. On the other hand, in the substance, Thus Spoke Zarathustra is played at the end, when Monstro Elisa Sue takes the stage and presents her new form to the audience. I feel like the use here is more comparable to the use of the song towards the end of A Space Odyssey. We are witnessing Elizabeth transform into her own version of a star child. I mean, she literally ends up on a star. The epic track here celebrates Elizabeth's transformation of psyche. She is confident as Elisa Sue and finally recognizes herself as both Elizabeth and Sue, a concept she treated as separate all throughout the movie until this point. She has accepted that both are equal parts of her. Just as we must accept that all forms of ourselves, no matter how they've transformed physically over time, they are all equally important parts of you. Your quote-unquote peak form, as well as your least applied version of yourself, it comes from the same matrix. Your form has such a wide range of potential, yet at the same time, Coralie Farja insists that we can only achieve the next step in our social evolution by foregoing our bodies and expanding our ideas beyond. And yeah, despite my flowery language, it's not a revolutionary idea. Yet clearly, we still don't understand, considering the majority of us still allow these shallow biases to cloud our judgments. And I think that's the difference between the two movies that makes them two sides of the same coin. Gerwig takes this relic from the past that is Barbie and praises it as a revolutionary toy, but also examines how we have evolved past it. And Farja takes a current attitude towards body image and self-worth and explores how we must move past that in order to reach the next step of our social evolution. Together, they provide a simple outline of past, present, and future. What you get out of these two movies depends on where you are in the conversation, and if you understandably feel like you are beyond the shallow messages of these two movies, well, it just sounds like you are ready for your next monolith. If you've watched all the way up to this point, thank you for watching. As you could tell by my many outfit changes, I had to rewrite this script several times, and even then, I'm not sure if this is anything cohesive. I should also note that despite me glazing it, I don't think that The Substance is a movie without flaws. Broe Deschanel made an excellent video talking about why this movie teeters onto ageist hagsploitation territory. I'd recommend her video if you'd like to learn more about that. And I also understand the criticism of the Quentin Tarantino-esque ridiculousness of that ending, though I personally enjoyed it very much. Overall though, The Substance captivated me, so I just felt the need to talk about it. You know, when you got a special interest, you gotta talk about it. Anyway, please let me know what you thought about both movies, this video, etc., and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye. But you're not ready for that conversation.